I mean, it really is. However you look at this, it is really quite an extraordinary decision. We were talking about this last week and also this weekend. For me, it was always a matter of time as to when he would stand down. Now, if you remember, he said only God would make that decision, or unless he was ill. And then, of course, he was diagnosed with COVID. He's been recovering in Delaware. And then he held a meeting of his closest advisors and his wife, and he made the decision to stand down. It's really been quite a tumultuous period, I think, in US politics, and I think it's fair to say that. Kamala Harris said she's honoured to be endorsed, saying she would earn and win this nomination and unite the country against Trump. She went further. She said, we just have 107 days to go until Election Day. Together, we will fight, and together, we will win. The question is, will they? Can they? Joining me now, Laurie Laird, US political commentator. Good morning, Laurie.
Morning, David. How are you?
I'm really good. We keep talking. And here we go. Do you know, it was a week...
I think the same thing.
Well, about the same thing, right. I think a week ago we were talking about Trump and the assassination attempt. Fast forward a week, now we've got Biden standing down. US politics gets pretty exciting.
David, honestly, I've reached the point where I don't even want to walk away from my screen and get a sandwich because something extraordinary happens every time I turn around, although I'm going to try very hard not to use the word historic. How overused has that word been amongst commentators? I know we have seen as historic things, but my God, it's a word that we're using so very often. But yeah, about a week ago, we were talking about the assassination, and we sort of touched on the fact that maybe Joe Biden might be too old, that we were still talking about that disastrous debate he had on the 27th of June. When was he going to go? And the funny thing is that we all knew, as you said, there was an inevitability, wasn't there? He was going to have to go. And yet it was still a shocker when this news popped up yesterday.
Well, it was a shock. I mean, I was actually asleep at the time, but it was a shocker, and I know around the world there have been...
Of course you were.
Well, you know, I'm a good boy. You know, the thing about this decision took many of his own staff by surprise, because the campaign team were ready to go out. They were being briefed. They said, right, when he's back and he's better from COVID, we're going to continue with the campaign. He can win, and so on and so on. And it then transpires that actually, despite them putting together this campaign schedule, he then had a very small group of people, his closest aides, including Steve Ricchetti, Mike Donilon, Annie Tomasini, people like Anthony Bernal as well, and crucially his wife, Jill Biden. One of our other commentators made the really astute observation, Kamala Harris not involved.
Oh, come on. You just took my line, David.
Sorry.
That's exactly what I wanted to point out, that Kamala Harris has not been in the inner circle for any of the big decisions that Joe Biden has made, including the biggest decision of his political career. She did not get a whole lot of notice. It looks like we're starting to piece things together now, and it looks like that inner core came to him late on Saturday and said, there is no path here. There is absolutely no path. We've got private polling in all of the battleground states. And listen, mate, you aren't going to make it. So it looks like the ball started rolling on Saturday, very tight meetings on Sunday, and we had this announcement late yesterday afternoon, early yesterday evening. But that's the point I wanted to make. Kamala Harris, nowhere near this inner core. She hasn't been near this inner core on any of his big policy decisions. And I don't think, while Joe Biden has endorsed Kamala Harris, that doesn't come as a big vote of confidence. Now, here's the question for Kamala Harris. One of the problems that I see with her nomination, or not her nomination, let me take that back, I'm getting ahead of myself, with the endorsement for her candidacy, is that she is very much associated with all of the things that people didn't like about Biden's presidency. It doesn't matter that she hasn't been anywhere near them. We haven't seen her for 3 years. I think in the public's mind, there is an association with Kamala Harris and the high cost of living, Kamala Harris and the mess on the southern border. So that association will not help her, despite the fact she's been nowhere near those policy decisions. So it's sort of...
Sorry, I was just going to say, when you look at...
Go ahead.
Well, Kamala Harris, right, her track record on immigration has been pretty woeful. She is not the best orator, I think I'm being fair to say, at all. I don't think she gives the sort of the look of strength to America if she was to become US president. It just makes me think, is that the best they've got?
Well, I mean, look, I think that she was her vice presidency has not been anything that we could call a success. Look, you and I said a week ago, we forgot what she looked like, right? It was almost like she was in hiding through the latter 3 years of the presidency. There's no big issue that we can associate her with. And as you rightly point out, initially she was tasked with the mess on the border. It really did hash that up. There's one infamous interview where she sort of giggled when she was pressed about whether she had even been to the border, and she said, well, I haven't, but I haven't been to Europe either. And we all sort of scratched our heads with that. Did not come across all that well. And I think we have to remember that Kamala Harris did not have a very good presidential campaign. Remember, she ran for president in 2019, didn't even get into 2020. Her poll ratings was never really much out of those single digits. And that was surprised a lot of people, surprised me, because her political careers thus far had been very, very impressive. She doesn't campaign very well, and I think she'll get a poll boost after this announcement, but she's not a great campaigner. I do not think this is the best move for the Democrats if they want to beat Donald Trump.
Well, you've taken the words out of it. There's a great comment by Tim Stanley in the Telegraph, actually. You're ahead of him this time. And he says, of course, they're rubbing their hands with glee that Biden is endorsing Harris, a woman perceived as failing in her brief on immigration, who speaks gibberish with the laugh of a hyena and couldn't even make it to Iowa during the 2020 primaries. However, maybe we're misrepresenting her. Maybe we are kind of not giving her credit for what she can achieve, because I think the role of the VP is to stand there and clap inanely when the president speaks.
I think that's a very good point. And the sort of, with Kamala Harris, there's the chicken and the egg. Was she prevented from doing much? And we're now learning that Joe Biden really relied on that inner core. I think that's why so many of us didn't realize how much she had failed. He really was protected. So was she kept out of big decisions, or did she choose to distance herself? We're not entirely sure about that. And I do think she'll get a poll bump, whether she can sustain that. But I was talking to a really well-placed Republican last night, and the Republicans are not exactly rubbing their hands with glee at her anointment. They are a little bit worried. They're worried that she may do better than we expect. Won't take much for her to exceed expectations. They're also worried about, remember the term October surprise, and they are very worried that the Democrats may have something that they spring on the Republican Party closer to the election.
But here's the dichotomy, because J.D. Vance is saying, right, Biden needs to go. Biden now goes. And, of course, they were crying wolf here, because actually what they wanted was for Biden to stay.
Absolutely. And J.D. Vance is an interesting character. I think he's polling very well right now. I think that the Republican convention went without a hitch, even though Donald Trump's keynote speech was a little bit rambling. That was a very well choreographed convention. And in fact, when's the last time we talked about a party convention, right? These things usually pass without any note whatsoever. But I do wonder about Vance. I think there may be some unknowns there. He has not been vetted nationally. In fact, his Senate campaign, he's only been in the Senate 18 months or so he's not really tested politically. That campaign was funded by a man called Peter Thiel, who founded PayPal. He's a Republican, almost a libertarian, has more money than God, and has picked out a number of candidates. So Vance's Senate campaign was going nowhere until Thiel stepped in, blew it away with money. We don't know a whole lot about this guy. And I also wonder if Donald Trump is going to be a little bit, might get the huff with Vance in the limelight. Donald Trump does not like to share the limelight.
No, and
there's a lot of it on Vance right now.
It's a brilliant point. And you say, of course, we don't normally focus on conventions, but of course the attempted assassination and Trump turning up with a bandage, welcome like a deity. I mean, it literally has made headlines across the world. On one of the other shows last week, you may remember, of course, we had those Republican delegates who then turned up with bandages on their ears in solidarity with Trump. I then had a bandage on my ear on this very show to just to illustrate.
I missed that.
Oh, right. So to illustrate actually what people were doing, that they were in solidarity solidarity. Actually, Laurie, whilst you're there, let me just play you the clip from last week when I was wearing a bandage on my ear in solidarity with Donald Trump. I'm wearing a bandage on my ear because it is a sign of love, yes. Several supporters of former President Donald Trump wore bandages like the one I'm sporting at the moment on their ears to the third night of the RNC in Milwaukee in Wisconsin. Now, the Arizona delegation that were there, they said they're wearing the bandages as a sign of solidarity with the former president after he survived that assassination attempt. Now, there they are. I feel I'm with kindred spirits. We're all wearing our bandages on our ears as a sign of love. So there you are, Laurie. Now, what has happened is that clip has gone viral. I've had 4.6 million people view that particular clip.
Have you really?
I have, but do you know what has happened? It has brought all the haters out. I mean, the language on Twitter. So you're right that no one watches those kind of conventions until now.
Absolutely. And really, the Republican discipline has been utterly remarkable with pulling that off. I think that, and where the Republicans are going to have to watch is Donald Trump. Can he retain his discipline? And his speeches, he did a rally on Saturday that was where he kind of wandered all over the place and had quite a bit of vitriol toward the Democrats. But I'm wondering, have you looked, I'm digressing up here for a moment, but have we looked on the Donald Trump website? Can you get a Make America Great Again ear bandage? We got to look and see whether they're marketing those. And if so, we've got to get you one, don't we?
Well, ever so kind. Thanks very much. I'll settle for a cap, actually, Laurie. Just very quickly, if I can, a lot of talk about whether Biden actually is exhibiting signs of Parkinson's disease, which is an awful disease. I've treated with people with PD, and it's a terrible, terrible disease. We also found out in the New York Times that apparently this neurologist who specialises in Parkinson's has visited the White House something like 8 times in the last few weeks. I assume there's a lot of chatter about whether the president does indeed have Parkinson's.
I have heard that quite a bit, and I think that discussion has been sparked by the visit of that neurologist. I want to make sure I didn't say urologist.
No, neurologist. And I think, at different end of the body.
Absolutely, and I think the White House has not been candid about this, but these calls that we're hearing from the Republicans for Joe, at least Stefanik, who's a real supporter of Donald Trump, New York Congresswoman, she has said Biden should step down now. That to me seems ludicrous. We're talking about whether he can serve for 4 more years. He can oh my gosh, the bicycle video, I'm just looking that you're running there. But the man, I think, can serve for 4 more months. But yeah, I think that, and doctor friends of mine have also said when we see him, Parkinson's is something we would not rule out. But I think we have to be a little bit careful at watching a guy on television and diagnosing. But we all know the guy's not well.
No, that's right. The guy's not well. And I think on a human level, it's just dreadful to watch. And we showed a clip earlier of lots of gaffes that he's made. And clearly he isn't in the same form that he was previously. You can see the mental decline there. He's an older chap, isn't he?
Yeah, although I'll tell you what, 81 looks different on some people than on others. True. We forget that Donald Trump is only 3.5 years younger than Biden. And Trump is campaigning on being, the bright young thing of the campaign. Age does hit people very, very differently. But I think no matter where you are on the political spectrum, watching that interview or that debate on the 27th of June, it was painful, David, wasn't it? It was absolutely painful. Whether you like Biden or not, he has a very long, fairly distinguished career in public service. And watching this decline in public really is quite painful.
It really is, Laurie. Very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. That's Laurie Laird there, US political commentator.